Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ryan Carella. Behind every great school is a great leader. So it is important for us to have conversations about the strategies that can make principals most effective. Joining us and to discuss that topic this week is Jorge Rivas, a longtime educator and current principal at the Cornerstone Charter Academy in Central Florida. Jorge is the author of the book, Principals Matter, Highly Effective Leadership Strategies, which came out earlier this year, and you can find it on Amazon. Jorge, thank you so much for being on with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Ryan.
You have close to 40 years of experience in education. You've worn all the hats: teacher, counselor, district supervisor, assistant principal, and now principal. I'd love for you to reflect on those 4 decades. How has education changed the most in that period?
Wow, that's a great question. So from the beginning, when I started as a high school teacher back in 1988, 89, I would say there was a lot less data being used. There was a lot less accountability, and there was a lot less oversight. In today's fast-paced, high-stakes atmosphere that we're working in, all those things have changed through the years with the advent of the governor's A+ strategy, and then eventually moving into FCAT, and now the FAST exam that we use. A lot of what we do is really just to build an amazing school, but a lot of our focus is getting good results, right? So that we can get a high grade and that we can be recognized in the hierarchy of successful schools.
Yeah, definitely a higher reliance on data and oversight. We're a lot more data driven now as an industry. How has that transition been for you? When you started out, obviously we weren't as data driven in education. That's become a bigger part of what you do, especially now as a principal. Was that an adjustment for you, or are you a big data guy?
Well, I welcomed it at the beginning for sure. I thought we didn't use enough data to, drive our curriculum, to analyze our instruction, to see how the results were coming about, and to see whether we were successful in our teaching practices. I was an economics major with a minor in political science. I kind of backslid into becoming a teacher. There was a high school, Miami High, that I had a connection to. They offered me an economics job in the social studies department. So I transitioned into there, not really knowing what I was going to find, but I ended up falling in love with teaching. And one of the things I noticed that, it was all teaching out of a textbook. You follow the chapters, you do the unit test. I don't want to say there wasn't as much pressure as there is today. You obviously had that internal pressure of connecting with your students and teaching the material well, and ensuring that you had an understanding from the students, because many of the students are getting ready to graduate high school and move on to college. So you wanted them to know as much as they could. But it's definitely changed in that aspect, in that now everything is data driven. So you know exactly where you stand from the baseline, the first test of the year, mid-year to the end of the year. And it lets you know whether you were successful as a teacher, if you're a teacher, or as a school, if you're a principal and you're analyzing the data for the whole school. So data definitely has just changed the way we approach our practice.
And we treasure what we measure. A fellow econ major, a man after my own heart. Yeah. I love it. Let's talk about your book, Principals Matter. And before we get into the content of the book, let's begin with the title, just the idea of principals mattering. Can you reflect generally on the importance that a principal has at a particular school, what value they bring to a school, and just the idea that like a good principal can really make a big difference, and these are not interchangeable people?
Sure, absolutely. I think that, not saying this because I'm the principal, but I do think that the principal is the most important person in the school as far as what type of a culture you're going to have, the focus on instructional practices, the relationships that you have with your community, However, you should be the least important person because your role is really to support everyone and the job that everyone is doing. So the book kind of came about because of that notion. I had been, and as you mentioned when we started, I have been in many different roles. I've been an instructor, a teacher. I was a school counselor. I was a district administrator, supervising in curriculum and student services and counseling, assistant principal and principal. So I've kind of seen different schools through the years, different leadership styles, different focuses. And it just led me a couple of years ago to kind of put all of my, I guess, ideas and thoughts into what makes a principal successful on paper. Just things that I've noticed through the years, things that I've kind of, I guess, from a personal level, I've implemented in schools where I've been a principal at. I'm currently at Cornerstone Charter Academy in Belle Isle, Florida as a principal. We're a pre-K through 12, so it's a pretty large school. It's a very highly successful school. We're a high-performing school. But this is my 5th school I've been a principal at. I was a Dade County public school principal for 10, 11 years. I was in a couple different schools in Miami. And then since I transitioned to Academica, which is, the best career move I ever made, I love the autonomy. I love the support that we get being an Academica principal. So I've been a principal at Pinecrest, opened at Pinecrest in Claremont, moved to a Matter a few years later in Kissimmee, and now I'm here. So I've kind of been in different networks. And the interesting thing for me is, I've worked with a lot of different assistant principals through the years as well. So, I've had an opportunity to mentor, and a couple of my assistant principals I've taken over as principals in these schools. So I'm always proud of that, right? And we still have a very good relationship. So for me, it's just been, a labor of love, right? Being in this business, doing all these different job roles. I still love it to this day. I'm so passionate every time I walk into the building. And, I learned through the years what I felt worked and didn't work. I've seen certain principals that I have admired and worked with. A couple of them are part of the Academica family. We've worked together. I was the assistant principal for, an amazing principal in one of our schools down south, Silver Palms, Somerset. And, I would take like little tidbits from every principal I worked with through the years and say, okay, you know what, I love this. I love that. Some of the things I said, well, maybe I couldn't pull it off the way they do, because I think part of your leadership style has a lot to do with your personality and how you view your role. So I guess to sum it up, it's just, I've arrived at where I'm at, and I wrote this book because I feel like I've been around in enough years, and I've been in enough different roles where I can kind of have a philosophy that has worked for me through the years. And I was able to put it on paper and kind of use it as a little reminder to me. I hate to say this, but I read my own book sometimes, right? Sometimes I get here early in the morning before anybody gets here, and I'll open the book, and just read a chapter or two just to remind me why I'm here.
That's really cool. And I would love to learn more about the core message of that book. But since you had brought up this idea of you having insight into the things that work and make principals effective, as well as the things that don't work and don't make principals effective, I kind of want to talk about the latter a little bit first. Can you talk a little bit about what might be some of the biggest myths in terms of what make principals effective?
So I would have to say that our job, probably the most important thing is, we need to connect with our staff. We need to have that strong relationship with them. And one of the myths is that we sit in our office in an ivory tower and we crunch data all day and we delegate and we direct traffic all day long. We do that. But I think, it's important for us to be out there, to be visible, to be welcoming the students when they arrive in the morning, and the staff. I probably say good morning 500 times a day, and visible walking in and out of classrooms. We all do that. All principals that we work with, we're all trained to do that. But I would say, one of the biggest myths is that we're not engaged.
Hmm.
We're all engaged, and principals do work very hard. And being, part of the company I'm with, we collaborate a lot, we talk a lot, and we share a lot. And we're all focusing on the same things. We're all sharing little secrets that we each do in our schools with each other. We all have the same challenges. Depending on which schools we're at, they may look different, right? Because maybe from a socioeconomic level, from a demographic area, but at the end of the day, we're all dealing with the same challenges.
All right, now let's talk about the core message of that book. So now that we've dispensed with some of the myths about what makes principals effective, let's get to the main idea. What have you found in your research and your years in education are the things that make principals effective?
So I think first and foremost, the most important thing you can do as a principal, especially when you're new at a school or you've opened up your own school, is to just get to know your staff, build your relationships with them. No one talks about that personal social connection that you have to have as a principal, that likability factor. Everyone talks about strategies and details and facts and being an analytical person and understanding the data. And all of that is really important. And we talk about that later in the book. But I think the most important thing you can do as a principal is really get to know your staff, right? On a professional, personal level. You have to get them to get to know who you are. So you share a little bit about yourself. You find out a little bit about them. How was your family? How was your weekend? Because there are going to be times when you're going to have to roll up your sleeves with them and ask them to do things that are a bit challenging, right? There's a lot of work to be done in the school. So if you don't have that connection with your staff, it's going to be hard to move them. It's going to be hard to get them to follow you. It's going to be hard to get them to trust you, to feel that collaboration with you. My doors, we always say our doors are always open, right? And I know as principals they are, but how many people walk through those doors every day? Right? So you want to have an environment that's welcoming. People come in to talk to you about something, and you end up just having a conversation that you didn't expect. And sometimes those are the most important conversations, when you can dig deep into, maybe somebody wants to share something about themselves, and you connect on that personal level. Once you do that, then you're teammates for life. So I think that part is, for me, something that has worked through the years, and probably one of my strengths is my personal social, the people skills, and probably related to the fact that I was a counselor for a while, and I really learned how to listen. I wasn't always the best listener when I was younger, right? But through the years, I've kind of gotten to understand the importance of having that relationship building quality that you need to have as a leader.
I like the idea of school principals getting a little bit of experience in the counselor's office first before heading to the principal's office. I could definitely see that being a valuable asset for them.
Yeah, there are a few out there, by the way. And we share that with each other. There are great principals out there who were never counselors. So I'm definitely not going to sit here and say you have to have been a counselor to be a great principal. There are great principals out there, but there are a few of us out there who are principals who were counselors. And we always kind of kid with each other that that's the best training we got to be a principal, was that counseling training.
I'm with you on that. Let me talk to you now about, I think, was one of the central ideas of principal management activity, like leadership strategies, which is how a principal manages, right? There's one school of thought that a principal has to be something of a micromanager, actively involved in, closely coaching their staff members, having a very precise vision and being very purposeful about making sure everybody is acting in accordance with that vision. And then there is another school of thought that says that principals work best when you find the right people, support those people, and then get out of the way and let them do what they do best. Let them bring in ideas that are maybe different from what your vision is, but you trust them as professionals. Where do you kind of stand on that divide?
I'm a big believer in finding the right team, right? You build your vision, you analyze the school that you're at, you analyze the data, and you see where you want to go. You you kind of have your ideas in place of where the school needs to move to, and then you analyze your staff. You get to know your staff. You get to see who has that those leadership qualities, that expert knowledge in different subject areas, who you find the ones who have that growth mindset, that are always willing to take constructive criticism and elevate their game. And then you build your team, and when you build your team, that is one of the most powerful things you can do as principal. We call them our go-to people, right? And when you have your team in place, you have to nurture that. You have to feed it. You have to, provide them all the support you can provide, emotionally, financially, however you need to do. Feed them often, right? There's a lot of different, strategies. You kind of direct the work. You impart in them your vision and make sure that they're on board with your vision, and it's their vision as well, because it can't just be yours. It's got to be a shared vision. And then provide them all the PDs they need to become really good at their jobs. And then you sit back. I don't want to say you disconnect completely. You empower them to make decisions. You empower them to run their areas, their departments, whether it's elementary language arts or secondary student services. You support that. You support them so that they can run these programs effectively without you micromanaging. No one likes to be micromanaged. And, you do spot checks, you do weekly meetings, or, every couple of weeks, hey, let's get together. How are things going? And then that gives you an opportunity to reflect and assess if we're moving towards our goals, if we're moving towards our vision. You get to discuss certain things that maybe are hot spots that are brewing in different areas of the school. And, you can address it proactively instead of waiting till it gets to the point where, you have to, unfortunately, maybe write a person up or something like that. Like, that's always my last option. I try and have conversations. I try and work with my team to provide the support, because at the end of the day, it's hard for us to find good quality teachers. So we're going to find teachers out there or staff members that are not sometimes the best, but they have a passion to be better. And then our goal is to support that passion and try and make them that highly effective staff member or teacher, or counselor or administrator, right? Because we're only as good as our people at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
We could have the best ideas. We could have the greatest vision. We can have an idea of where we want to take the school, but we can't do it alone. And if you don't surround yourself with a good team, you'll never get there.
George, I've been working pretty closely in the last couple years with the Doral Leadership Institute and Doral College on master's programs and other training programs designed to cultivate the next generation of school leaders. We are identifying a lot of very promising early career educators who want to go into administration, and I would love to be able to share with them some of your insight on what they could be doing to set themselves up for a enriching and successful career in school administration. So for the early career educators who are watching or listening to this right now, what advice would you give them on what they should be doing right now to prepare themselves to be the next generation of effective school leaders?
I would say take on as many leadership roles as you can within the school. Closely work with team leaders, grade level chairs, assistant principals, lead teachers, your principal. Really get to know the behind the scenes processes that take place in running a school. And I think that'll, number one, that'll give you an idea of whether that's the direction you want to take. And if it is a direction you want to take, then you'll have had that experience working closely with your leadership team. And then as you move on into leadership roles, you'll have had mentors that, maybe you can emulate what they did, or maybe you can see some things they did that you didn't like. Because, at the end of the day, my assistant principals who eventually become principals, they have their own style. They're not going to do everything I did. I don't want them to do everything I did, or I don't want them to lead the way I did. I want them to lead something that is aligned with their personality and their goals and their ideas. And if they can take a couple good things from what I did and, what they learned while they were working with me, then, I figured I was a successful mentor if I did that. But the more leadership experiences you have, I think the more you're going to benefit from that. And Ryan, just adding to that, I am part of the DLI team right now that's training principals. We have a program in DLI called the Opal Academy, where we've created this PD for principals who want to get a specific certification on their certificate that's called school principal. It's like a higher level, second level of certificate. And I'm working with Miss Marty and Miss Montano, Carrie Montano, because there were a few of us who had that on our school certificate, mainly because we had worked at the district and, that was a requirement when we were there. So now we're training, there's 62 principals in our group and a few assistant principals. And I'm one of the lead trainers. I believe there's like 4 or 5 of us who are doing the training for these principals. So a lot of what I talk about in the book, we talk about in our coursework. We use the Florida standards, the FELS, FLDOE, Florida Principal Standards, and we break it down and we create groups within these 62 individuals, and they dissect case studies and we talk about best practices. But as we're teaching these classes and we're teaching these standards, we keep going back to a lot of conversations that are similar to what's in the book. And Miss Marty and I talked about that one day, because I did give her a copy of my book. Obviously, she's one of my mentors in life. I worked with her 38 years ago. She was my administrator when I was a teacher. And we were just commenting on how there really are no secrets in this business. It's just, to be, and the leadership qualities that we talk about in the FELS and the ones I talk about in the book are leadership qualities that, corporations train their leaders to have. It's common sense type of stuff. And that's something that I put in the title of the book, common sense lessons. I wrote the book and I didn't put chapters, I put lessons because, we're educators and, they're common sense. There's no secrets in there. It's just something as you read it, you'll go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh yeah, I've seen people do that, or I've seen my principal do that. And it's just good practice stuff.
What a privilege for both of us to get to work with Judy Marty, the president of Doral College, longtime school administrator. Our guest has been Jorge Rivas. He is the principal at the Cornerstone Charter Academy in Central Florida. His book is Principles Matter, Highly Effective Leadership Strategies. You can check it out now on Amazon. Jorge, this has been really cool. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. One last question before we let you go. If with the snap of your fingers, you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
That's a great question and a loaded question, right? And we talk about that a lot behind the scenes, especially in today's climate, right? Where, we have a state that's very involved in education and educational ideas and practices. And we have a governor who's very involved and very passionate about education. If I could make one recommendation, if I was sitting in the room, I would say, I think it would be important for us to focus a little more on early childhood. Having been a high school principal, middle school principal, elementary principal, I've always noticed that the students who enter kindergarten prepared are on a trajectory, a path to really maintain that excellence with the right teaching, the right curriculum throughout the years. And the students who struggle in kindergarten or first grade, who maybe were maybe they stayed at home maybe with a grandma, or not that there's anything wrong with that. But if they didn't get that foundation that they needed, in pre-K3 and pre-K4, they're going to enter kindergarten a little bit behind, and some do catch up, but many struggle catching up in kindergarten, first grade. So I would say let's add some investment dollars into our early childhood programs. And we'll find that that investment, will pay dividends as the students move forward.
Well, as the parent of a preschooler, you definitely know how to suck up to a podcast host with that terrific answer about investing in early childhood education. Jorge, thank you so much for being on the program. This was a blast. Best of luck.
You're welcome, Ryan. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation.
And thank you all for checking out Big Ideas in Education.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.